you know, my punch list includes an update on the HVAC and ventilation, the asbestos work, the lead testing in particular. I have some questions about, and then if there's any remote mold remediation going on, particularly at Armstrong this summer. But did the district prepare anything today, or
well, it's up to you as chair. It's up to you as chair to prepare the agenda. I think I'm very happy to prepare agendas going forward, but it is, you know, we normally defer to the chair on that. But I'm happy to prepare agendas going forward if you wish.
Right. So I have an agenda in front of me. I guess the thought process is Rocco, you had I saw a presentation. Do you have something you'd like to go through to begin with?
Yeah, Rick. I mean, I've covered a lot of your items, so if you don't mind, I'll share my screen, and then I just give you an update on kind of our stuff. There may be other things going on in the district that are not run through my shop, but I'm happy to cover all of our ground, and we can fill in and supplement your agenda from there if that works for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good.
All right, please tell me you can see the screen.
Yes.
Indeed.
Awesome. And hopefully in a second you see an agenda.
Yes.
All right, so you'll see kind of the ground I'd like to cover. Obviously, we'll start by introducing the new Director of Operations, and I'll cover some of the COVID stuff. I'll rely on Carl and Robert to fill in the blanks on things that I don't know. One of the spin-offs of COVID and HVAC is bipolar ionization. So I have a specific task there I'm going to speak to. I'll give you updates on Northeast and the summer abatement projects, both of which are moving forward as we speak. And talk about the 3-year re-inspections and management plans from an asbestos adherence standpoint, and then close with lead in drinking water. And then I think the only thing you mentioned, Rick, that wasn't covered here is any mold stuff, and I'm not aware of any active mold abatements, but we can talk about Armstrong and some things the district is thinking of doing, I guess, this summer to avoid the need for mold abatement. So let's start with the new guy in town, Robert Rucker. I'll let him do his own introduction. I've had the pleasure of meeting Robert, not as an OSHA compliance officer, fortunately, but as he took over. So Rob, you want to just give us a little background on yourself?
Sorry, Rob, you're muted.
I'm starting us off amazingly. Word. So again, hey, Rob Rucker. Pleasure to meet anybody here I have not met. Hopefully one day soon, once this whole COVID thing is over with, I'd love to meet everybody in person. I spent the past 20 years as either a soldier or as an Army civilian, you know, and my last position I held was a compliance officer with OSHA. I'm very focused on, you know, our employee safety and also, more importantly, the children's safety here in the schools. So mitigating out the environmental concerns that we have and what this committee's for, which I think is outstanding, is definitely my priority. If we can provide a safe and healthy work environment for these students and employees, I can go to sleep easily at night. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. There's a little bit on Rob's background, and I know there is a transition period that's planned. So right now on all of our reports, we're still including Paul as projects kind of close out and transition over to Robert's management. We're kind of doing dual stuff, but I don't imagine it'll be very long, and Paul will be fully out of the mix and back into technology and secondary education and curriculum and all those fun things he enjoys doing and does well. So I did want to say thank you to Paul. I know he's not on the call, but I think, Ro, as you mentioned, we chatted a couple weeks ago as he was wrapping up, must have been middle of May, and it's only a little over a year. And not only have we gone through a pretty significant asbestos emergency, a global pandemic, 2 massive abatement projects, and a host of miscellaneous other stuff. I think, Rob, you walked into a machine that is well prepared for the future, including this environmental task force, which I'm not just saying because I'm on the call, but I participate with a lot of schools, K to 12, higher ed, and there's nothing like this with this joint multi-constituent organization-based employee and student-focused health and safety environmental committee. So kudos to you guys. In terms of the COVID situation, I just included kind of the GPI summary of ventilation that identified kind of what one of the key controls is. We know COVID is still active, although as vaccination rates improve, positivity rates continue to drop. I think as of this morning, we were under 4%, not under 1 yet, but certainly trending in the right direction. I talked to my brother who lives in Annapolis. I think they were at 1.7% in Maryland. So things are improving. That said, one of the good things that I think will carry over from COVID is this focus on ventilation, fresh air, improved filtration, improved cleaning and disinfection, which will help us from a public health standpoint and infectious disease control tremendously across all of the schools. But one of the areas that came out of there were some areas don't have any mechanical ventilation, and those are obviously not occupied now. I think they primarily include Whittier Annex and Bancroft. But in a handful of areas, about 6 schools, there are unit ventilators because of the design. This tends to be the like 1960s, 70s vintage schools that recirculate a lot of air through a unit ventilator within the classroom. And those are particularly challenging because they don't readily accept high efficiency filtration, such as a MERV 13 or greater. So some of the plans there involved some novel cleaning devices that the district approved, and I'll move into that. But before I do, I'm just gonna kind of kick it over to the school folks, Carl, Robert, to just talk about your experiences relative to COVID as it relates to cleaning, disinfecting, ventilation, you know, not necessarily the administrative controls, but how are things working? Are they under control?
The teachers want the kids to use the bathroom.
Carl, can you hear me?
Sorry about that, Rock. I was muted. Yes, I could say that we're still following COVID-19 guidelines. We're still social distancing. We're wearing our mask in the buildings. We're doing our deep cleaning, following all the guidelines and parameters that were put in place when this whole thing started. So that's just a continuous ongoing thing. We're doing all of that. And as far as the ventilation and everything goes, Scranton Electric is still out there working on the ventilation, putting ventilation in where it was never in place before. Upgrading and improving the ventilation that's in place, using bipolar ionization. Many different things are happening along the whole COVID-19 scenario, so to speak. But yes, the district is still following all of those guidelines and rules and implementing all of those plans and moving forward with every one of them.
So additionally, with the COVID guidelines and everything that's put out by, the state, Fed, everybody, those are the minimum standards. And we're exceeding the minimum standards. We're going to step up above and beyond. We're going to make sure we're hitting high contact surfaces more often. We're making sure we're actually going to go through now. It's our 6-month filter change. So we're going to be swapping filters out, changing those out very soon, ensuring that the locations that can accept the MERV 13 filters are replaced. And we're going to see, with Scranton Electric about other locations that can accept the MERV 13. Just because we have access to a filter, as you said earlier, it doesn't mean that we can place it on every device. So again, everything that's put out is a minimum standards, and we're exceeding each one of those in every COVID related issue that we have.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of checks and balances in place where we cannot use the MERV 13. Bipolar is being used, so it's just like an ongoing domino effect. We're knocking things down and improving things as we go.
Carl or Robert, is there any discussion yet on what the fall looks like in terms of, I mean, obviously you'll follow whatever, Department of Ed guidelines and health guidelines that exist, but have you guys talked through kind of what capacities are like, virtual options? Has any of that been looked at yet?
I haven't heard of anything along that line, Rock, but I'm not like totally involved in that all the way. But as far as I know, no, I haven't heard anything on that yet.
Those are active discussions, and everything's still fluid up in the air with how, PD might allow us to have virtual or whatever. So all these discussions are actively happening, but we just have not come to a consensus or a decision yet. So once we do, we'll definitely set up guidelines and everything to meet or exceed the requirements. Again, everything they put out is a minimum.
Rob, I want to, at the risk of being regarded as a Luddite, given the shift since March 2020 to the realization that a touch infection is much, much, much lesser than aerosol infection, I forget the proper word. We close one academic day a week for deep cleaning. I wonder whether, and I would like to ask whether we can do a deep assessment of whether that will still be necessary, whether we can meet our touch surface requirements and exceed the requirements without taking 20% of the face-to-face academic time away from the students.
It's something we can always entertain and look at. And again, as I stated, at the beginning of this, I'm here to make sure that student employees are safe. So it's something we can absolutely look at. And if we determine that, yes, it's something, we can get that 20% back of teaching, that's great. If not, then we'll just have to continue exceeding the standard.
Yeah, because I feel quite strongly about that. I think it was the right decision made at the time, but as with all of this virus, new information and new data is changing what we thought was important. I mean, I don't think there's an American alive that still wipes down their groceries with Clorox wipe. And I'd just like to put that into the mix of your discussions, Rob, please.
No, absolutely. I think one of the big concerns, especially in the elementary schools and even in the middle schools, kids are constantly touching everything. I have 3 children under 10 myself, and I'm constantly wash your hands. It's just something that, these children touch everything and they touch each other. So yeah, the risk is lower, I would say. And I would argue that for an adult, in let's say an office environment, let's say in the building I'm in right now, I would say that would be a very valid argument. But once we put it into a school and say, I have 300 kids running around touching each other, it becomes more difficult. And even trying to, enforce a social distancing, a lot of children, you know, your pre-K, your K, your one, your first grade, they're not, they don't fully understand it yet. So it's definitely, as I said, something we'll entertain and look at. We just have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying we should do away with the deep cleaning, but I'm saying that maybe that time between 8:20 and 2:40 on one of the academic days of the week may not be the most efficient or appropriate time given the overall goals of the district. That I'm just saying that I think we need to be courageous enough to look at. To look at the fact of balancing off the benefits of closing the school 20% of the time as against that academic time, if there is a way to achieve the deep cleaning without that. And I think that, for me, is quite a priority.
No, I understand, absolutely. And it would end up resulting in a shuffle of how the students come in, because you're gonna have three days for one group and 2 days for another, or it's going to end up having to mix all the students back into everything. So,
sorry, Rob, not to interrupt, but I wasn't talking about this year. I'm talking about next year.
Yes.
Next year when we do our full in-person reopening.
Okay.
This year, no point changing it this year. We're so close to the finish line, I think, to everyone's great relief. No, I'm talking about next fall. That I just wanted to put that marker down to be sure that next fall we wouldn't be taking academic time for deep cleaning time.
No, I understand. And yes, that's something we are talking about.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Ro, in terms of things that have changed from the beginning of the pandemic to now, and I think I've said this on multiple occasions, so it's not new, fomite contact transmission, it just doesn't occur. It's just not in the research as opposed to aerosolization. You know, if we were to do the pie chart, how much of this virus is contracted through droplets versus aerosols versus contact, that has shifted pretty dramatically through the year or 18 months. So it certainly makes sense. I'm also curious, and I don't want to turn this into COVID central, but is anybody monitor your vaccination rates? And I understand, you know, the smallest of children yet aren't approved, but how is vaccination rates tracking for the district, both in terms of adults and the adolescents?
I got an update yesterday from Bert Gentileza, and this afternoon they're having the clinic for the second dose of the 12 to 16-year-olds. I don't know if you recall, three years ago, they approved it at 3:05, and at 3:06, the first needle went into a Scranton student between 12 and 16 because of the clinics. And I really applaud the work that's gone into organizing those clinics. They're fabulous. This afternoon, they're going to be giving second doses to 350 people. The second clinic they had about 10 days after the first, we're kind of staggered. So there were another 200 took their first dose then. Now that includes family members. I don't have a breakdown as regards age. With the staff, the teachers, I think, have all had the opportunity to become vaccinated. That was a great achievement of Bert's and the others with the hometown healthcare people. That was the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, but it was made available and a great many of our staff took advantage of it. I think those staff who, and of course the numbers don't count those 12 to 16-year-olds who've got their vaccinations privately. But I think that with staff, everybody has had the opportunity. The only non-vaccinated staff would be those who've chosen not to become vaccinated for either personal or medical reasons. We will be having another.
Today, it's just, oh, I thought you sent it to me. No, yeah.
Carl, you're not muted.
Carl.
I know we're having another clinic. Obviously, we'll have another clinic in 10 days for the first group. It's like playing hopscotch, really. But we will be offering clinics, I think, for everyone. And I think there's definite plans for another one in August. And I'm hope a lot of the 16-year-old, a lot of the 16 years and up were already, you know, the high school seniors that I know all leapt at the chance. So I think we're going to see significant improvements. The big question, I think, is going to be whether the vaccinations get full approval from the FDA and are then included by the Association of Pediatrics to be part of the recommended and mandated vaccinations. That's a discussion I think that will be going on for a long time. I'd like to see a situation where, like mumps, rubella, chickenpox, diphtheria, and tetanus, it's a mandated vaccination, but that's just a personal view.
Well, and we're certainly dealing with a lot of other higher ed institutions that are struggling with that right now as they make their plans, you know, to accept children or students in the fall, whether or not to mandate students and or faculty and staff. So you're certainly not alone. All right, let me move on then to kind of a corollary to COVID. Carl mentioned the term bipolar ionization. I wanted to comment because we have some significant work in this space. Again, the application of this technology, this bipolar ionization, is a cleaning technology that has been proposed for areas where we can't bring in sufficient outdoor air or equip ventilation units with MERV 13 filters, such as, you know, Scranton High for the most part, the newer buildings, or even the older buildings, southwest. Those have no recirculation. It's all new air, if you will. So you get a lot of air exchange. But in those areas where we can't, in fact, in 181 classrooms across 6 buildings, GPI and Dewey have recommended the use of these bipolar ionization units. And we've kind of taken a cautious approach. We, meaning Rocco, Cacciardi, I believe a representative of the environmental health and safety community. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but it is that they're not recommended specifically by EPA. They're not recommended by ASHRAE. It's not that they're discouraged. It's that it's a wait and see approach because it does produce some chemical changes, some molecular changes to the atmosphere. And if you're not familiar, essentially every one of these unit ventilators has a fan. You can see in the diagram here, give me 1 second to throw my little laser pointer thing on. In a fan, this is the intake area where that fan spins. These units run an electrical current across these 2 electrodes to create essentially like a plasma that alters the air coming in and is believed to be a couple of things that happen inside of that unit. One is that it charges particles, positive and negative, hence the term bipolar. So positive and negative ions are created, electrons that stick to things and change their polarity, making them, like old magnet days, you know, attract and stick together. Taking small particles, sticking them together, allows them to be captured in filters that they otherwise wouldn't. So if a 0.1 micron particle would blow through a filter, if you can get 10 of them stuck together, you end up with a 1 micron particle that can be captured. So it essentially improves your filter efficiency by sticking things together. And at the same time, because of this electron, it will change. It creates a hydroxy radical. It adds oxygen to the party, or can break molecular bonds. So it can change and neutralize or inactivate a virus from this hydroxy radical that can be created. There is some downside, and the caution comes from the production of ozone, because you can add an oxygen molecule, essentially creating ozone. Now, these units are certified not to generate ozone, but certainly the original version of these, that was one of the hazards. Secondarily is some folks have reported anecdotally that because you're sticking things together and they drop out of atmosphere quicker, which theoretically is a good thing, you will have to increase your cleaning because small particles that normally would be airborne are now dropping out of atmosphere and onto the ground. And then the third element that we're a little concerned about is because we can change the chemistry in terms of volatile organic compounds that are just naturally in the atmosphere or off-gassing from carpets and furniture and cleaning products. You may modify them, breaking some bonds, but not all. So there's reports of areas where toluene, for example, may have been at a particular level, and it drops after going through the ionization chamber, but you break it down not completely, so you turn it into acetone. So we'll see toluene drop before and after, but acetone increase because some VOCs don't fully degrade. So as a kind of a precaution, before we start slapping these all over the place with children, the district has asked us to move forward with kind of a baseline testing, kind of a before and after. So the chart that you see is part of a white paper that I prepared for the district a month or so ago. And it really kind of looks across the range at all of these issues that are out there relative to bipolar ionization. And it identifies kind of our action plan. And I won't go through each of these in painstaking detail, but I talked a lot about some of these. So particulates, we're measuring PM 2.5, which is particulate matter, very small, ultra fine, very fine particles, 2.5 microns and lower, before and after, and we're obviously expecting that to improve and have less particulate matter in the atmosphere after. We're measuring ozone so as to ensure we don't create any problems. We're measuring total VOCs. These are done passively. Air is collected in an evacuated canister, and then we're comparing that to residential screening levels. ATP is interesting. This is a part of the cell wall that is in all living organisms. It's often used in the food service industry and in healthcare to document cleaning. So every hospital, unbeknownst to you, is doing wipe testing on food trays and door handles to ensure that the cleaning they're doing is effective. So essentially measures in a relative scale the amount of living things. Doesn't know whether it's a virus, a bacteria, a skin cell, a dust mite. It's just essentially a luminometer that's measuring how much living stuff is there. We're doing some pre and post wipe testing on desks just to say, hey, is there more stuff falling out of the air, and is the area dirtier as a result of these? Maybe the air is cleaner, but the surfaces are dirtier. carbon dioxide, I'll skip for a second, and then ions, just to ensure that what the manufacturer says this thing is doing, it is actually doing in a classroom setting, not in a controlled chamber in a laboratory. But for these to work, what we would be expecting significant increases in the amount of ions. So that's our baseline testing program. We have completed all of the schools for all of the parameters, with the exception of ozone. We had a little trouble with our ozone instrument, so we're bringing in another instrument, but that'll be done, should be done this week. And then we will have a solid set of baseline parameters, representative, not every classroom, not 180 locations, but multiple points within each of these 6 schools, so that when we do install these units and turn them on, we will ensure, my concern is not even do they make things better, but ensuring that they don't make things worse, right? You know, first, do no harm. So first thing I want to make sure of is that we don't create any problems as a result of installing these. And if they do work and they improve cleanliness and concentrations of some of these contaminants, then all the better. But it is a novel technology, and it is a little bit new and unproven. But you know, somebody may ask, well, why would we do this if it's new and unproven? And Carl and maybe to a lesser degree Robert, because he wasn't around for the decision making here, there's a lot of positives. They're energy efficient. They don't require continuous maintenance. They're easy to install. There's no risk of, you know, the children sticking their hands in them. Whereas with some of the other, they don't make any noise. So contrary to a portable air cleaner, which we may put in, say, at a medical office or a nurse's room, that creates other problems, these operationally look really good. They look good on paper. But that's what we're doing. And in one of these items, carbon dioxide, which you've probably heard me mention in the past, it's a good proxy for fresh air. So as part of this, the district purchased 10 of these units. It's called an onset data logger. And after some research, we selected these. And these give the district some ability to kind of portably deploy them out to a variety of schools to measure carbon dioxide. So we all exhale carbon dioxide. We can measure that. We know what's outside. And as we see carbon dioxide levels increasing, that's an indication that we have poor air circulation. Doesn't mean there's COVID in the air. Doesn't mean there's flu virus. Doesn't necessarily mean it's clean or dirty, but it means there's a lot of recirculation going on. So it is a way that the district then can utilize these. They're pretty simple to work. They're little batteries, they're portable, they're Bluetooth. So you can walk around with your cell phone, download the data, look at a histogram of what were the levels throughout the day, and then maybe make some informed decisions of, we need to open more windows, we need to scale back things, our levels are good, they're bad. And again, carbon dioxide's not dangerous in terms of we're going to inhale too much. It's just an indicator for fresh air. So when you do get this, and I know Jenny will post this, there is a link to a school district. They're being used in a lot of school districts, either in 2 capacities. One is every classroom gets one, and they're centrally connected to a monitoring system, which would be incredibly expensive for a district the size of Scranton. Or they're being used like we're recommending, kind of a cache of these, a dozen of them that you can deploy they measure temperature, humidity, and carbon dioxide. So they can be used for a variety of areas and let you know how changes to the ventilation system are manifesting themselves in the classroom. They're also pretty easy to lock down. So there's no alarms, there's no bells and whistles. We're not going to evacuate, third floor at West Side High because the CO2 levels got too high. But it does give us some additional monitoring capability in a very practical way at the desk level, not necessarily at the sensor in the ventilation system level. Commentary, questions relative to COVID, carbon dioxide, bipolar ionization, any of that?
No, just to touch on the data logger real quick, Rock, we could also set a parameter on these units to notify us if any of the levels that we preset are exceeded or, rising into a dangerous situation. So we can know all of that before it even happens and realistically troubleshoot a problem as it occurs. Is that correct? Or?
Yeah, you're correct.
I have a question about the bipolar ionization units, and I'm not sure, Rocco, if this is a question for you or probably more so for the district. Did we purchase 181 of those units? Is that correct?
That is correct, I believe, yes. I wasn't involved in the purchase, but I believe that's the number.
So we did some baseline testing, basically to evaluate how well they're working and are they creating other issues. If we find out that they are creating other issues, what avenue do we have? It just, I guess from a science perspective, I'm wondering why we didn't just buy, 10 of them, do the baseline testing in a small sample before we committed to doing all of them. Are we confident that, they're not going to have other issues? Or?
Dan, I can speak to some of that. Are we confident they're not going to have issues? The answer to that is we don't know. I know both Dewey and GPI have had experience with them. There are a number of other districts that have deployed them and they've seen them operate. I can tell you that when you look at the research, it's a mixed bag, but it's sprinkled with a heavy dose of too new to tell. The technology itself sounds good and has worked in some areas, but the application in a school, in classrooms, outside of a chamber, in a controlled laboratory is just not there. There's not. It's new technology. And I think everybody in my field, in my profession, is a bit skeptical of everything that's just kind of blown up post-COVID. And you have to separate through the science what's, I'm not saying these are junk, but what's junk that somebody's looking to capitalize on a whole lot of COVID money, and what is legitimately novel and was in the pipeline and has been tested and proven, and now here's a great application. And I think we can look at vaccine production as a good corollary, because the mRNA vaccine, we didn't just create that, in 2020. That had been developed and tested for a number of years prior to, and then COVID gave us a great opportunity to deploy it. So I think, what are you going to get your money back? I don't know the answer to that. I can tell you they're not turned on yet, because we want to make sure that we have good solid baseline before we throw the switch. And again, there's very limited data that says these are going to be a problem. These are not terribly dangerous. There's none of that stuff, but it's a little wait and see caution on my part.
Are they installed yet, Rocco?
I believe some are installed, but they're not on.
That's fine. Okay, so we're in possession of them.
Oh yeah, they exist in the district. Harold is, they're very easy to bolt on. You can see in the picture before that this unit just bolts on. So they may have been bolted in two screws and a plug. They're just not plugged in.
Okay, so well, then, Rocco, you know what I really appreciate about you, Rocco, is that you have the most astute sense of caution, and your experience tells you when you are going to sweep into something and when you're going to be cautious, and it is a great attribute to have for the district, to have your, I hear what you're saying, but just let me prove it. And I love that. Thank you.
All right. Well, the next board meeting, when I say out of an abundance of caution and get ripped, I'll be looking to you, Ro, to get my back.
Carl, I have, Rocco, I apologize, Rocco, I have had your back since the beginning. I'm a great believer in an abundance of caution, as you know.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, Rocco, without you and your abundance of caution, we would not have been discovered and found the problems at Northeast with the asbestos, and we would not have remediated them as thoroughly and quickly. You have no idea how grateful we are, even if there is the occasional ripper in the audience.
All right. Well, then I'll move on. Then, speaking of Northeast.
Excuse me, Rocco.
Oh, yeah. I'm
okay,
sorry.
I do have a question, more on a technical nature. So that assembly that gets bolted to the fan, I'd assume that it only operates while the fan's operating?
Correct.
Right. So I guess that would, and they're used in areas where there's no external ventilation, correct? That's the intent?
Yeah, I'm not going to say that exactly, Rick, because there is dampers on these units that control some amount of outdoor air through them.
So I guess where I was going was, are these going to, I guess, require the fans to be operated essentially like 100% duty cycle, always on, which may be different than how they're set up today?
Yeah, Carl, can you comment to that? Do you know the answer to that?
I don't know the exact answer to that, but I do know they work hand in hand with the fan. I don't know the technical answer to that, but
so
these are going to be in place where we cannot use the MERV 13 filter. So these are going to be a substitute for the MERV 13. Where we couldn't put the MERV 13, you know, we're going to put the bipolar in, and this is just another step, like Rock said, in the COVID pipeline or whatever. This is just another alternative to the MERV 13 filter or stuff like that.
But Rick, your point is well taken. They may be running them on continuously now anyway. I'm not sure that, I think post-COVID, their goal is to move air. So I believe those fans are on a continuous cycle when the building is occupied now, but I will get an answer to that for you.
Yeah, I guess what I would be interested in is if, you know, a cool day in the spring when it's no need for your typical ventilation or HVAC, the fan may not be running, right? Then you're not getting the benefit of the cleaning.
One of the things with, you know, air quality inside of a building is you have to exchange the air no matter what, X amount of times per hour. So if you're looking, you know, just maintaining a general well-being, I believe, and I'm not an HVAC mechanic or just something be more for Harold, but I believe it's 4 times an hour you need to exchange all the air in the building or all the air in one room out to maintain a clean and healthy environment. So I know now with COVID, we've increased that and we're exchanging the air more. So I believe these fans are always running. But going back to how this ionization product will end up working is, as you see, it has that pigtail off the back of it, which has all the wires, and they're going to connect out to a controller, and the controller is only going to call for it to turn on as the fan operates. So the device itself isn't going to stay on. It'll only fire or operate while
understood that. Yeah, I got that. Thanks.
Okay, so let's talk, move on to the big summer projects. We have 2 significant projects this summer that were both run through Dewey as part of the capital projects that you've heard about, I'm sure. Both use ESSER funds, the federal government kind of COVID monies, I guess, for lack of a better word. First is Northeast. Obviously, we've, you know, talked about this ad nauseum here, but I'll just give you a quick update on what's changed. We are doing both old side and new side with this project, doing primarily two types of materials, thermal systems insulation. Again, the infamous tunnels that you see in the diagram represented here. This happens to be the old side. There's also pipe on the new side in the basement area that's being abated as part of this, but tunnels are being cleaned. There's also somewhere in the neighborhood of about 8,000 square feet of tile that is being removed through both. That project was bid earlier this spring, was awarded to Lycoming Supply. A1 Environmental is their primary sub. They're a Scranton-based a licensed abatement company. You may remember those names because they were awarded South. Well, it was South plus a whole lot of other schools, but it was primarily South last year in the summer abatement. Because this project not only is remove the asbestos, but then reventilate these spaces through air handling units, which are going to be mounted in the attic of the new side. There is a mechanical contractor that's got a significant project as well. They are mechanical out of somewhere in the Lehigh Valley. I'm not sure, but they're going to essentially reuse the chimneys, the brick line chases that went from the classrooms to the attic. These were not supplies from the tunnels, but they're returns. So if you envision the tunnels supplied air up into the classrooms. Each of the classrooms had chimneys, if you will, ducts that went to the attic where air was exhausted. They're going to put flex ducts down through those and bring in climate controlled, tempered air, filtered air into the building. So they all will have mechanical ventilation, utilizing those as essentially a chase now, not as a duct. So part of this project is cleaning the old fan room, removing the mechanicals associated with the tunnel system, that old wooden fan that we've talked about, as well as cleaning and lining these chases. Abatement begins the minute the kids leave the school. They are occupying the new side. We did put in firewalls, so the buildings are separated physically and mechanically. So children remain in the new side, but we can't start any abatement, obviously, until the kids leave. And then that work is scheduled to be completed by mid-August. And then the district is reflooring all of the areas that were abated. MICO is re-insulating all of the areas where insulation has been removed. Obviously, that doesn't apply to this section because we're not utilizing this system anymore. So that's Northeast work. In addition to Northeast,
excuse me, Rocco. That on that last slide, when you say abatement completed August 14th, does that include the re-insulation and the flooring too, or is that just abatement?
No, that's just abatement, and that's really the final date. I think their work is scheduled to actually be completed like first 10 days of August, and then we have some cushion in there to get our final clearances done. Any punch list items, re-cleaning, that kind of stuff.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I could say on the district's end, as Rocco and his crew go in and abate the areas and clear the air quality, our tradesmen and mechanical crews will be right behind that, following up the process of putting the floors in and putting all the finished touches on all of these areas. MICO is actually over there right now. They started their work last week. They were over there. They started cleaning these ducts and preparing and getting involved in their work as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that we're going to be working hand in hand with all the companies in place to put the final touches on all of these areas.
Yeah. And this was actually fairly reasonable in terms of cost. Carl, I don't have that prepared, but I want to say it's in the neighborhood of $150,000.
I don't know the exact number, but that sounds familiar.
Yeah. So that actually came in significantly less, because we were thinking 150 just for the old side, but that includes a lot of pipe and flooring in the new side as well. The whole package came in. Now that's just my part, the abatement. I don't have the mechanical stuff, was probably significantly more, but it does put us in a really good shape to reoccupy Northeast.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, I believe everyone was surprised with that number. Not only you, Rock.
Yeah. So in addition to Northeast, that's not the only asbestos work we're doing. We have our kind of summer abatement program, and this was really started after the inspection process was to identify those materials that were kind of the next wave. If we already took rid of the red stuff, this is like the yellow stuff, or, you know, kind of, it's still there. It's in student contact areas. It's somewhat susceptible to damage. So these were 8+ schools. That may or may not include some additional work in the admin building, but there's a minimum of 8 schools, including Bancroft, which were approved for, you can see the numbers, flooring, insulation, a ceiling scrape at Sumner has got a couple of like popcorny ceilings, which are susceptible to damage. It also includes, wasn't Sumner, it's Robert Morris that's got the ceilings. It includes encapsulation, the wall panels at Charles Sumner, shown in the diagram. If you've ever seen Charles Sumner, these green pebbly looking things. We're encapsulating, and I'm just going to talk for a second here, because folks will hear, oh my gosh, the exterior panels are there and my kids are playing with the rocks and all that stuff. We did test that wall panel, and it's essentially a sandwich system of a steel plate on the inside, what we call a transite, a cement board, a styrofoam, another transite, asbestos board, then a concrete aggregate, a concrete material, and then aggregate stuck to it, the pebbles. So it's pretty well protected in there, but just to kind of take a little bit of extra caution, minimize the chances that there is any damage or release. Mechanically, these panels are pretty well connected and would require a significant amount of money to remove. So we opted to do an encapsulation project, essentially seal those pebbles to the concrete substrate that it's on. So again, I don't want to make anybody believe that this asbestos is just laying on the ground there. It's pretty well protected, sandwiched in. But since we were doing this work and we know there's potential for damage and kids are playing in the area, I think to Robert's point, this goes above and beyond, but it is a relatively cost-effective way to just give us an extra barrier of protection. That's included here. That project was awarded to Datum Products of Dunmore. Again, a familiar name because they were one of the 2 low bidders last year and did primarily the work at West and Willard last year's abatement. They start again, same time, with the exception of Bancroft. Actually, Bancroft was an ad, an alternate to the bid. And because of the decision or lack thereof on what the ultimate disposition was, we wanted to have a number, because if there's a chance that Bancroft is occupied in the fall, this has got that classical asbestos pipe that runs in every classroom. So we were able to utilize the contract and the scope of this large project to get that for a pretty good deal. And since this is a friable product, you'd have to get rid of it even if you demoed the building. So it makes the building more marketable if ultimately you get rid of it. It makes it safer if ultimately you reoccupy it. And you saved a bunch of money by doing it at this time when you had all this other work going on. So Bancroft was actually started and is being cleared today. All of the work is done. 2 guys, I think it took them 5 days, 7 days, something like that with prep. So really a good success story there. And it's not all gone. There's still some pipe in the attic, but any student contact areas, including the lunchroom, have been abated there. So you're in pretty good shape with Bancroft. That work's getting done a little sooner than Northeast. It's not nearly as involved in terms of re-insulation or reflooring that's going on, and that is a single prime. So Datum is responsible for reflooring any of the floors that they pick up or re-insulating, at least at Adams, where there's a significant amount of pipe in child-occupied areas. That's being re-insulated, the basement area, by Datum or their subcontractor. Again, came in, Carl, you remember the number here, 115, I think. Again, significantly cheaper than we thought. And it was a well orchestrated event. The thing started real early in terms of the planning for this, but I think we're pretty pleased with the packages that what you have. Any questions?
No doubt. And to touch, just to wrap up Bancroft real quick, Rock, I talked to Robbie over there this morning. All the physical abatement is done. We took out roughly 650 linear feet of asbestos pipe insulation. They're clearing air quality today. We're not expecting anything crazy. And yeah, we'll close the book on that today. It should be wrapping up this morning.
No re-insulation there.
Just curious, I don't remember the itemization of Bancroft in the approval of the project. Was that added in after we'd approved the project, Rocco?
No, it was part of the original bid scope. I wasn't at the board meeting, so I can't say how it was presented to you, but when we solicited bids, we had a base bid that was 7 schools and then an add alternate number specifically for Bancroft. Because we weren't sure if we would have a decision on what was going to happen with the school. If you were closing the school, we probably wouldn't have executed it. But because there's still uncertainty, we included it. It was an additional $7,000 for Bancroft from the low bidder. Some numbers were as high as like $40,000 or $50,000 to do that work. And I think when you see what it took, which was 2 guys, 5 days, it was certainly more appropriately priced by Datum than anybody else.
All right. So, well, it's done now.
Well, just to clarify, I do believe we mentioned this at the board meeting. In fact, if I remember correctly, I believe Director Dempsey asked the question, noticing that it was on there and, just bringing that to our attention. So I do believe that was discussed.
I'm sure. Well, anyway, as Rocco says, it does make the building more saleable should the decision be made to disposition. There'll be community input into disposition if it is there. I suppose $7,000 is a reasonable investment in making it marketable.
I agree, and that certainly would have been my recommendation as well. I mean, these were anybody would have to get rid of them.
Okay.
Sell the building.
Thanks, Rocco.
All right, so we'll move on then. Last couple of slides. One is the status of the 3-year re-inspections. We've gone through now every building, with the exception of the Whittier Annex. I don't believe it's our intention to do that. Every building has been re-inspected from an asbestos standpoint, resampled where it needed to. That then obviously produced our summer abatement work plan and scope of work, but it also is going to manifest itself in new management plans for every building. There is some, minor change in just about every building from what existed in 2019. Nothing major. We didn't discover hundreds of linear feet of stuff or take out hundreds of linear feet. There were some minor things that we had maybe tested positive that weren't noted, or tested negative that were previously noted or previously presumed. So nothing significant in terms of what's in each building. Obviously, they've been modified over the last couple of years because of all the abatement work. The management plan is at the district now for consideration. There's kind of one area of the management plan that's still being discussed, and that is, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but generally speaking, a regular maintenance trained individual cannot perform any work on asbestos containing material, whether it's a floor tile or it's a piece of pipe insulation or it's a ceiling or a wall that's plaster. You're not allowed to modify the matrix for obvious reasons, right? We don't want to create a health problem. But the AHERA standard does allow for small scale, short duration style work. This was originally anticipated that somebody would have to hang a picture, drill a hole through a floor tile, fix a valve. And up until this point, the district has not entered into that workspace. Any known maintenance on asbestos containing material is done by a licensed abatement firm. It doesn't have to be that way according to the law. You are allowed with 2 days of training called O&M training to be able to do small things, not for the purposes of abatement, but if you had a leaky valve, you could take an elbow down. If you had to drill a floor tile, if you had to hang a picture. So right now, we do this training, and many others do as well, a couple of times a year. Paul and Carl are contemplating, and I guess, Robert, you're going to come into the fold shortly if you haven't already and weigh in on this. Should the district have a small O&M crew of 1, 2, 3 people just to be able to do some of that work? Yes, there's inherent risks for them, but that's why we do training and personal protective equipment. But it does give you some additional flexibility. You don't have to have datum do every little bit of lagging and do every little bit of repairs. Things happen. We had a leak at West Side High. You have a water release. You get something or other, a piece of floor tile pops up. You'll be able to handle that. So that's really the only question. Other than that, there's kind of a unified management plan for the entire district. It's just annexed by each school's inventory of material, but the management plan speaks to all of the material. So hopefully that's done and in place by the summer, and absolutely will be done by the time kids get back, because if we do the training and there is this O&M crew that's identified, that would happen. I think we're running the class in July sometime for all the other districts as well. So
Rocco?
Yes, ma'am.
O&M for those among us.
I'm sorry, operation and maintenance.
Okay, thanks. And secondly, was this Carl's first inspections? Carl,
yeah, I believe it's certainly the first time Carl has joined us. He did 6-month surveillance inspections prior to us doing the 3-year inspection. So every 3 years done by a licensed building inspector, that's us. And then every 6 months surveillance by Carl.
Well, it's fabulous to have Carl able to do that. I think it's a huge efficiency and addition to the district. But also it is great that we've now got all the schools on the same schedule, right?
Yes.
Or schedule, as you would say.
Yeah.
So I think this is a huge step forward in rectifying the appalling asbestos management of the last 30 years. And I really feel since December 2019 through to June 2021, we seem to have tamed the beast of asbestos management and plans and coherent and going forward. And I think it's a great credit to everybody who was involved, to all of the people who've put this in place. Much more confidence now that the district is in a good place. So thank you to everyone involved. And Carl, well, you know, it's great that we have you in-house able to do the 6-monthly inspections.
Thank you very much, Ro. I appreciate that. And with Chicardi's help, I mean, we transitioned into that pretty easily. I went up there and got my designated person training from Rocco and his crew, very professional. And yeah, I think they were absolutely moving in the right direction. And we're in a different spot today because of Rocco and all of his advice and suggestions and all the hard work that everybody put in. Not only myself, but this entire district.
Yeah, let me just build on that, because this is now the 2nd year where we've done asbestos awareness training for the entire maintenance staff. So while Carl gets designated training and can do the 6-month surveillance, for an asbestos program to work, you got to have a lot of eyes on this stuff, know where it is and know the condition of it. And that's done by law through the asbestos awareness training. So by having all of Carl's guys or Robert's guys now, guys and gals, I mean that, you know, having them aware of where the material is, what condition it should be, what to do if there's an incident, particularly as it relates to contractors. I mean, I don't suspect, you know, anybody's maintenance staff's going to go in there with a Sawzall, but unbeknownst to them, if there's a, you know, the Verizon guy comes in or the mechanical guy that may be from out of town, he may not know that that's a plaster wall or that the pipe insulation is asbestos or something. So that awareness training is absolutely key to keeping your program in a good spot. And that's the 2nd year now we've been able to do that. Take a day of their time away, but we obviously think it's incredibly valuable.
No, that program did work out really well, Rock. In addition to that, I have all the building supervisors and all the custodians in the building. I made all of them aware that there is a management plan in place. So when an outside vendor or a mechanic comes into our building to do a work in whatever particular area, we need to revert back to that management plan, find the area that the work is going to take place in, look that area up, make sure there's no hazardous material there. If there's not, we're okay to do the work. If there is, we call Rocco and we go from there. So everybody is definitely much more aware of what we're working in our surroundings because of these training programs we went through. So it's working out pretty good.
Thank you.
Just to foot stomp that, what I'm hearing there is fantastic, right? So it's night and day from where we were when we ran into the problems at Northeast. And I guess to add to that, going forward, from my viewpoint, part of the problem that kind of led to the program in disarray a couple of years ago is this training an effective way to like make sure there's continuity between the turnover and maintenance personnel and the, you know, the applicable administrators too, that this awareness, is that something like, is it going to be like a yearly awareness training that the staff goes through?
Rick, I'll jump in on that, because the whole reason, I'm not going to say the whole reason, one of the reasons why we got involved in February 2020 with Northeast was because my firm does, in addition to like lead and asbestos stuff, we do general safety consulting, you know, your lockout, tag out, fall protection, OSHA, 30-hour, 10-hour outreach training. We were involved with Pat Laffey because the district is self-insured from a workers' compensation standpoint. You don't pay an insurance premium, you pay your own claims. The law in Pennsylvania is that you have to have an accident and illness prevention program, what's called the AIPP, 16 elements of a safety program. The district has to maintain them. You were being audited by labor and industry, and we were brought in to assist from your third-party administrator in developing the written protocols that support that AIPP. And one of those elements is training. So actually, when I coordinate the training for the district, it's not done through Paul or through Carl. It's actually done through Bert Gentileza and Pat Laffey, because it's part of the workers' comp self-insurance program that we do that work. So I think, yes, it is institutionalized now. And there's a formality to it. Some would question why we have all this paperwork, but there's a reason why we have all that formality, because in order to be self-insured, you have to have this program in place, and they do get audited to make sure it meets the guidelines of the Commonwealth. So.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So lastly, and then I apologize if I'm running long and you're sick and tired of hearing from me. I'm sorry. But lead in drinking water, just quick summarize it all on one slide. We did it in the fall, winter, October, November, December, something like that, for this current school year. We issued a report to Paul in February. Following that, I think there were 76 distribution points that tested high. 17 schools had something that was above the EPA action level of 15 parts per billion. That is kind of plus or minus 1 or 2. I think we actually went to like 12.5 parts per billion. Because of some inherent error in the monitoring and the analyticals. That resulted in like 83 or 84 samples that tested positive. Carl and Paul went and outfitted almost all of those with point-of-use filters or replaced the fixture. Fortunately, we didn't have any systemic problems where it was incoming water supply or a leaded line at the main. This was all, later in the distribution network, usually a fixture or maybe a fitting or a valve at the sink or area. We went back in, resampled again in March and April after that work had occurred. All of those areas have been retested and are below the action level, with the exception of 2 samples. And they were only because we couldn't test them in the winter, the water was shut off. So their first test was actually when they opened the stadium in the spring and turned the water on. They shut the water off for obvious reasons in the winter there. So one I think has been filtered. One, Carl, his fixture was replaced.
That's correct. 2 locations. We put a filter in the one location and we changed the filter in the other one. I talked to your guy, Rob, this morning. We're flushing today and we're retesting tomorrow.
Okay. So we'll have that retested, assuming they come back good below the action level. Then, we'll put a bow on this year's sampling If they, for whatever reason, test above 15, we'll come back and do some additional evaluation. In addition to this, we also did test. The district is procuring, they're getting rid of water fountains. We didn't even retest water fountains because they're a thing of the past. It's pandemic reasons. There's a whole lot of reasons why they're just not good. So the district is moving down a path strategically of replacing those with bottle filling stations, a little more modern. Those have filters already built into them. We did purchase the district purchased 2 or 3. We were asked to test them at Prescott. They were as low as the detection limit. So they were essentially as no lead as you can get. Then we gave the green light to those. I don't know what the master plan is. Carl or Robert can tell you how many schools are getting them and when they're getting them. They were added to this package just to make sure, for similar to what Dan, I think, said, before we buy 180 of these things, let's check them, just make sure we don't have a problem. And they
exactly, Rock. We purchased 2 actually.
2.
We put them both at Prescott. They're working well. It was an easy transition, taking the old water fountain off the wall, obviously, and of course we use the same supply line. These they're surface mounted units. They're on the wall. They don't stick way out. They don't take up any room. It's a nice unit. It's made by LJ. It has a built-in filter with a built-in indicator to tell us when the filter is going bad. We actually purchased all the replacement filters. So all of those things are in place and all those protocols. But I believe the district goal is to put these bottle filling stations in place of a water fountain in the entire district. I don't have the timeline on when that's going to happen. But again, we did road test this project with 2. It worked out really well. Paul has a questionnaire out there going around throughout the district asking principals how many units they may need in their building. I'm sure all that data will be looked at by someone other than myself, make that important decision, and we'll move on from there. Yeah, we did purchase 2, and they're really good.
I actually have a meeting with our business person this week to put an RFP out for that, because it's not going to be a cheap process, but it's definitely something that.
Yeah, they are. They're a little pricey.
Yeah.
I think they're $1,400 a unit, in and around there.
Yeah, roughly. And then I believe we found some that meet the same standard from the same company that it will reduce the lead or remove the lead completely for a little bit cheaper.
Yeah. Yes.
Rocco, a couple questions on the lead. There's a report up on the website from you guys. It's dated the 7th of April, but looking at the list, the numbers don't align with this slide. So maybe you can help clarify. See, there's a first round result and a second round result, and there were like 9 or 10 that were still above the acceptable level. Was there other work done that it's not reflected in this report?
I'd have to look at the April 7th report, but clearly that's not all of the retesting that happened. If there was, you're saying there's how many?
I think I counted 9. I mean, I could show you, and that would maybe spark some other questions I have. Yeah, let me see if I can do this. Let's try that. Can you guys see it?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, this is April 7th. And reading through it, it looked like there was, it references the 73 or 76 items that had been found originally, and then added up to a few extras within their tolerance that you added onto it to get the 83. But there were several in here that this tannish color was your marking, this yellow is mine, but that were still above the limit. Yeah, so I counted like 9 or so in here.
Yeah, that's correct. And then in all of those cases, Rick, we went back and made a determination as to, was it filtered? Should it be filtered, or do we need to replace the fixture? So in the case of, I think it's South, I can't see it on that screen, but if you go to South, I think the medical suite had.
Yeah, here's one right here, sure.
Yeah, so that was filtered and still showed up high. So we went back and replaced both of those fixtures after that,
okay,
even though it was filtered. In some cases, they were not filtered and they were determined to be a hand washing sink. So we went and recommended that they be labeled as not for consumption. So we went through that whole list and then have follow-up sampling post remediation. So it would be a round 3, if you will, on that chart.
Okay. All right. So the after you did, I guess it depends on how you remediated it. If you had put another filter or a different filter or repaired it, you ran another test afterwards?
Oh, absolutely.
A third test?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So all these were addressed except for the ones that you mentioned.
Except for Memorial Stadium, we've gone back through and we'll issue it once we finish Memorial Stadium. There'll be a round 3 on there that will have all of the ultimate results of those. But Carl and I walked through each of those areas. I'm going to say, and now that I'm looking at it, Carl, we didn't go to Bancroft. But other than that, everything that's on there, like that Scranton High sink, there are 2 sinks in the area. One is filtered, tested negative. The other one is a small hand washing sink. We just labeled it.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the other observation was that some of these from the first test to the second test actually went up a little bit or considerably with the lead concentration. So I guess the something's occurring there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the something it can be so variable. I can tell you I'm gonna put a percentage on it. A large chunk of that is relative to the flushing. We try to hit between 8 and 18 hours of non-use. And we've had some challenges of making sure things get flushed and the message gets out and what sink are we using and when was it flushed, kind of thing. So some of that is related to that. Others is related to the aerator. So an aerator can capture little bits of biofilm and chunks of lead, and depends on when we collect that sample. If that comes out of the aerator at the time of collection, you'll get a spike. But I can tell you in the vast majority of these cases, our recommendation is always change the fixture. That tends to be the #1 source. And in some cases, they added filters anyway, even though they weren't necessary. Paul was a little aggressive with the putting filters things, but I think that speaks to Robert's point of we didn't just meet the standard, we exceeded the standard. I'm a meet the standard guy, but if you want to put in more filters, it's not bad. It's just you got to, change the filters.
You got to maintain them, right? Rock, I have a question for you, and there's no crazy question if you don't know the answer, and I don't know the answer to this, so I'm going to ask you. Getting back to aerators, when we went through the weatherization program and the Constellation program to make everything more efficient, they put aerators on all of our sinks. They really restricted the flow of water, these aerators. My question to you is, are we not pushing enough of pressure through these faucets anymore to, blow some of this lead out or move some water around? Because in some cases, the water is kind of down to a little more than a trickle. So should we have more power coming out of the faucet as far as, the restriction of the aerator? Are they too restricted?
Yeah, certainly I'll clarify my statement by saying that's not my lane.
Okay.
I'm not the plumber. And I think regardless of whatever the flow is, if somebody's going to drink out of it, I want to test it under those conditions. So I think the testing is fine, but aerators are notorious for being part of the problem, usually, again, because they're capturing particulate that ultimately comes out. So in many of my clients, they won't replace the fixture, they'll replace the aerator only as a way to save money. And that can sometimes, be the difference, because the water running over, lead, almost the way coffee percolates, you can end up with elevated levels. So they will replace aerators. That's a thing. But that being said, does the flow change the absorption of water? It might, but it's just not something I've ever heard or dealt with. I would refer you to the plumber guy.
No, just a thought.
Yeah.
Rocco, maybe I'm wrong here, but I do some water testing for a home inspection company, and generally speaking, I don't know that the aerator restricts the flow of water as much as if the flow of water is restricted, it may be an indication that your aerator is blocked up with junk. It may be catching the stuff that you're referring to.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I don't know, Carl, if your experience was the aerator, slows things down.
Well, yeah, I mean, when they went through that program and changed things, the flow of water really slowed down.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like I said, just a thought.
Carl, would it be worth investigating the aerator in one of those very slow flowing sinks just to see if Dan's point maybe has merit? I mean, it has merit. I'm sure it has merit, but maybe has merit in that case.
Yeah, seems simple to do. I mean, I can just spin it off and take a look.
Right.
See if that improves the flow, Carl, or if there's something else.
Okay, I'll do that.
I'm just curious. Let me know, Carl. I'm curious.
Okay, I will.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It truly is amazing what they trap. I mean, when I do the testing in front of homeowners, after we'll take that off and show them, the stuff that washes out of there when you turn it over and rinse it out is pretty concerning at times. I'll put it that way.
Huh. And do you change them out often, Dan? Like, is there a lifeline on these things, or?
Well, in my role, I'm just testing. So, it's almost a matter of keeping it clean. Essentially it's a mesh screen. And, for me, you take it off, you turn it over and you rinse it out and you can see the stuff that falls out of it.
Wow, okay. I'll have to take one apart.
Okay.
Okay.
That's it for me.
I have one other question with regards. I don't want to go back to those bipolar ionizations, but I'm going to because, I snapped a picture of that screen because I wanted to make sure I had it correctly. And when I'm reading that last paragraph, and I apologize, I'm looking at my phone here, and it says the use of bipolar ionization technologies in air cleaning systems is novel, which we agreed with, and little research is available to validate it outside of laboratories. The US EPA has identified that harmful byproducts may be generated by the technology, and users should ensure zero ozone generation occurs. And I'm cutting it off there. As a member of this committee, I got a big problem with, we're going to install a technology that A, we don't know if it's effective, and B, we don't know if it's causing harm. I think the prudent thing to do at the very least would be, install it maybe over, I don't know if you could do it over the summertime in a classroom or two, just to get some baseline data. I mean, I'd be concerned that a year from now we get some more research that says these aren't the way to go, and then it came across the desk of this committee and we all seem to approve it. Just curious on other thoughts on that.
Dan, as the guy that's done a lot of research here, I can tell you that New York City does not allow them to be installed in schools. New York City public school system won't allow them for, again, not because they're proven dangerous, but because they haven't been proven safe, if that isn't too confusing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a legitimate, and again, sometimes I get accused of being the overly cautious worry guy, but I don't disagree with you. I do believe that is the intent, to collect the baseline, install them, operate them, ensure that, you know, we're collecting VOCs because we want to know what the baselines are and that we're not creating some additional VOCs, or that we're not creating ozone as a result of that. I think that seems prudent to do.
And you think we can get a large enough sample size of data doing that on a smaller scale versus installing and operating all 181 of them?
I mean, logistically, I can collect the data the day they turn it on. I mean, when there have been studies as to the operation of this, you know, they literally shut it off, run it for 2 hours, take their samples, turn it on, run it for 2 hours, take their samples, because it doesn't take like days for this to work. So we could certainly collect the data pretty quickly following installation, but some of the data is real time, like the ATP wipe, you know, is instantaneous. The VOCs take a week or two because they go through a gas chromatograph at the lab. So it takes them, you know, a week or two to get that data back. So I think, you know, we could certainly work with Robert and his crew on the timing of that so that we don't turn them all on the same day. We do one school and collect some of those samples before we go through all of them.
Do we need a student population to get an accurate piece of data, or can we do that over the summer without students?
Some data is going to happen regardless. We don't need students, but if we want to test it in a realistic atmosphere, and I don't want to say test it because I don't want to make this sound completely experimental and we're using the kids as guinea pigs. These are being used. They are approved for use to be sold in the United States. So it's a little tricky. It's a little tricky. Well, I'm curious as to other thoughts.
I mean, Rocco, what I'm hearing you say is that you are putting a plan in place to monitor this. You'll continue to work with Mr. Rucker, with the people from Dewey and from GPI. I think, Dan, I hear your concerns and I share them, and I am so glad that we have someone who I think you used the word skeptical before, Rocco. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you know, I'm so glad that we have someone who is skeptical of these new technologies assessing this, because I think it's important that, Rocco, you note that these are not in New York City schools because they are dangerous, but because they have not been deemed to be useful, appropriate, whatever the word is we want to use. I think that's an important distinction, but I think to really be looking at these with a very skeptical eye is important here. And, you know, certainly making sure that we are assessing these in the most realistic atmosphere as possible. You know, certainly, again, we don't want to use anybody as guinea pigs. We want to make sure, I think it's important that, you know, these are approved for use and manufacture and have gone through, I'm sure, rigorous testing and safety measures to that extent. But, you know, I think we have to look at opportunities to get true information about this. So I'm very glad that the baseline information is being gathered already. And I think we do have to be cautious as we move through this.
So, a couple maybe out of the box ideas here. Instead of us running this baseline test, is it worth considering essentially subcontracting it out to a lab that deals with these types of things more frequently and would have the means of simulating that student environment? Or at least explore that option before we turn them on?
I'm not aware of, well, I don't know who that would be, I guess.
Right, I guess have we looked though, right?
I've not looked for, I've looked for research, and part of, you know, our white paper on this says that needs to happen. We've done kind of a partial review of the literature in identifying where these may have been tested the way we're using them. And there's just not a lot of peer-reviewed studies out there yet that say we've tested them outside of a laboratory, outside of a chamber, and we've proven you got 27,000 positive ions, like you said, in the chamber. Like, you know, so it's very difficult to get any kind of a realistic study that's been done. I've not found it.
And my concern is not even really how efficiently do they remove things from the air. I'm really stuck on the fact that we don't know if they have negative effects.
Right.
And
right, of course.
And I guess for me, I wouldn't put it in my own house without knowing. And I guess that's maybe the most powerful statement I could make.
I mean, are these things like UL certified or anything like that?
Yeah, they do. They do carry a UL certification, and they have I believe it's an ANSI zero ozone emission certificate as well. Now, the first generation of these was notorious for generating ozone. These are, I want to say it's ANSI. I may have that wrong. I'd have to go back through my notes that say that they don't generate ozone. So again, that's one aspect of it. The hydroxy radical piece is also out there, where you can, that's in the literature, that you can modify VOCs. Now, again, for the most part, we're not going to find a ton of VOCs in, you know, classrooms. These aren't manufacturing areas or laboratories that may have large quantities, but we'll have the data to say, you know, here's our list of VOCs, and this is a library search of probably 78 individual VOC, 78 compounds, and then they'll take the top 10, top 20 peaks that come out and say, all right, in addition to these, we've identified these compounds that weren't part of the 78 TO15 EPA list. So we'll have levels before and levels after. The befores are going to be pretty low to begin with. So I don't expect us to generate a ton, but again, we know that can happen. We need to have a piece of data that says, yeah, we tested it and made sure we didn't make it worse. So that's part of the reason why we would do this. The cleaning aspect, the ATP, you know, I think that's important data for Carl, because we know that we're going to get more stuff to precipitate out of the air. So as you know, the day we turn these on and there's little black things all over somebody's desks, somebody's going to start to get concerned and say, well, what is this stuff? And well, it's the stuff that would normally been flying around. You may have breathed it in. Now it's laying on the desk. So maybe we do need to, you know, clean at a more frequent level than we were before. So I think that, you know, we're obviously, I'm pleased with the proposal that we've given the district, and at this point they've said, go ahead and collect the baseline. Very shortly, we're going to get to the point where we're saying we're done, and now you got to do the implementation of it.
Rocco, we are having a series of operations committee meetings in the next few weeks to discuss the implications of the feasibility study. If when you get your testing back and all of that, would it be okay if we invited you at one point to one of those meetings just to report on that baseline information and the testing results?
You're paying me. I'll be wherever you want me to be.
No, but I'm just thinking that President Gilmartin, this may be an appropriate way, because our next task force meeting is not until schools reopen. I think it would be good to have this information when it's available.
Absolutely. And I think to understand what the path forward is as well. Yep. No problem.
Okay. I think, so you're done, Rocco?
I'm done.
Thank you so much.
Did I stop sharing my screen, or are you guys still seeing my screen?
No, we've got Richard's screen now. I think you got bumped.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to unbump you.
That's right.
Okay.
It's good to have it's good to have your screen there, because clearly you've got a list of stuff there. But Rocco, thank you as always. Your contribution to this task force is unbelievable. You keep our brains organized and give us the information we need. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rock.
Just a couple other remaining items I had on my list. Last year around this time, I know we had discussed the Armstrong HVAC and the mold problems it was creating. Is that kind of bundled now underneath all the other HVAC and ventilation work that's going on, or is that still an issue?
I'll speak to my piece of this, but I'm clearly not the smartest guy in the room, so I'll defer to Carl and Robert here. But I think it was 2 years ago. Now it escaped. Maybe it was 3 years ago. No, it was 2 years ago. It would have been 19, I think. Somewhere.
Right, yeah.
We had a mold problem, bloom, because of lack of humidity control. We lost humidity control in the building. And while Carl and his guys did a great job in a reactionary mode every day of identifying a new bloom and tearing out a carpet and putting in vinyl tile, that's not the long-term solution. Obviously, the biggest issue was we had no control, and this gets into Constellation Energy and controls and what's the 2-pipe system versus a 4-pipe system. But you had a humidity problem that didn't really manifest itself last year, probably because the systems were off or minimally utilized and windows were open. But I do know there was at least some dialogue on procuring dozens of dehumidifiers for Armstrong. They may have even been purchased. I don't know. I haven't done anything active at Armstrong in a while. So Carl, is the humidity A, a problem, and B, is the dehumidifier purchase? Did that occur?
It did occur. The dehumidifiers were purchased. There was dozens of them. It is Dewey's thought that, and again, Rock said we didn't have the problem last year. The reason we didn't have the problem is we didn't turn the air conditioning on last year. We just simply left it off. Dewey came in and they feel they could keep that building at bay with all of these dehumidifiers, and they plan on turning this air conditioning on at some point. It hasn't been turned on yet. The replacement of these units, I believe, is next year's capital improvement projects. It's not going to happen this summer. Excuse me. But yes, dehumidifiers were purchased. There is dozens of them. They plan to keep the building at bay with those strategically placed throughout the school. And yeah, that's their plan, to turn that air on at some point and keep the building at bay with the dehumidification. It hasn't occurred yet. We do have the dehumidifiers in our possession. They're up at Armstrong and haven't been turned on yet.
Carl, we are still actively, or perhaps even more than at other schools, keeping our eye out for mold. You've got your people are
yes,
mold seekers.
Yes, we haven't had a mold issue. No, we haven't spotted anything. Nothing in the aspect of mold. Just asbestos and lead at this point.
All right.
Okay. The other business I wanted to talk about a little bit was our next meeting, obviously, but also kind of a rhythm, I guess, with, I think we might have lost Rob from the meeting, it looks like. But, oh no, there you are. All right, you just fell off my screen. That's all. Sorry about that.
Off your thing, your bar
thumbnail
there.
list, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, where I was going was to coordinate an agenda before the next meeting. I think I'd like to reach out to you. You know, it was kind of hit or miss with Paul before, but for this next meeting that we have, I'll send you some ideas for the agenda, and then you could work with, you know, Rocco and I were very much on the same page today. And I don't expect the topics to change too much more, but I'll plan to reach out to you as, you know, 30 days or so before the next meeting. If that sounds good. And then also, I guess to put it bluntly, our public or parent participation seems to be falling off here from the task force quite a bit. I see Paul and I are the only two here today, and I think Mr. Werner also attended the last couple, but I'm not sure if this is a issue with the timing of the meeting or just a lack of interest. But I guess for the group, does it make sense for, or who do we think is appropriate to maybe reach out to those individuals who haven't been attending? Any thoughts there?
I can reach out to them.
Okay, Jenny, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and I guess based on their feedback, we could kind of evaluate where we want to go. If they don't want to participate anymore, and we want to engage some other folks, we could make that decision then.
Okay, sure.
And then the last thing, as far as our next meeting, I just assume, I think we're probably looking at September once schools reopen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wanted to mention, as I was looking at the calendar, our first day of school, I believe, is the 7th.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there's going to be a lot going on the 1st of September and also the 8th. So maybe we would want to push it until the 15th, or is that too long? I know things are busy at the beginning of a school year, and especially this year.
I think the 15th makes much more sense, Jenny, partly because it's unfair, I think, to ask our district representatives from administration to come in on a lengthy, I mean, we're now up to 2 hours almost, a lengthy meeting on the second day of school. There's always fires to be put out. So either I think before we go back to school or at the earliest on the 15th.
Do we
I think the 15th is good.
Okay.
By me.
Okay.
All right, September 15th.
Time still works?
Same time?
Well, I guess before the time, is there any interest in meeting in person, number one, and then number two, is there any value in perhaps touring or looking at some of the work that might have been done, just to throw it out there?
We're not opposed to having people come out and do tours of the facilities with this going on. Just one thing I will not allow is if there's active abatement going on in a school, I'm not going to bring anybody into it until the abatement is completed, more just as a personal safety issue for everybody around. And also, we don't want to breach any type of containment that Datum or whoever else would be doing the abatement has set up. So schools that are completed, absolutely, but active, no.
Could I then suggest, Rob and Richard, that possibly we have a small extra meeting sometime in August before the schools go back, when the kids are there, to go and look at the work. I'd particularly like to go and look at the work at Northeast, and some of the other abatement programs, some of the, so it's hard to tell whether one floor tile is another floor tile, but I'd particularly like to see the Northeast work. Possibly it's the work scheduled, I think, from memory, to complete about August 20, possibly sometime in the week before we go back to school, we could schedule an inspection just for those members of the task force who wish to see the work.
Absolutely, we can get you in there and do that. Just going back to what I said, as long as there's no active abatement happening, yeah, I'll be more than willing to get you in there.
How does that stand, Richard?
Sounds great.
I'd be very interested in that. Sounds good to me.
So just so I'm clear, we're thinking week of the 20th to do kind of a post-abatement tour, Northeast. Maybe some of the bigger atoms would have been done by then. That's a sizable part of the project. Sumner, Morris, yeah, something like that.
The sizable projects, Rocco. I think if other members of the task force wish to join us, we could, we could do that. I think it would be a hugely useful thing to do, and we can then assess and evaluate and from first-hand observation at the next meeting in September. So we can either set a date now with the understanding that it would change if the work is delayed. What do you think?
I think it's probably a good idea to pencil in a date now.
Ginny, the keeper of the calendar.
Well, that would be the week of the 23rd.
Okay, so the 23rd. Do we want to stick to a Wednesday? Anyone got a preference for a day?
That'd be the 25th.
That would be August 25th.
And what should we say? I know people who have jobs. Do we want to meet there early, late, what time?
I'm flexible.
Rocco, does 9 o'clock work for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I don't have anything going on all day on the 25th, so it's not golf league, so I could do 5 o'clock at night, 5 in the morning. I don't care.
What about you, Rob?
Yeah, as of right now, I got nothing on the 25th, so yeah.
Let's say 9 a.m. at Northeast, because that's the big one. We'll meet you at Northeast at 9 a.m. on the 8:25, with the proviso that, Rob, if it needs to change, you just let me know and we'll change it, okay?
Absolutely.
You know, if there's anything going. I think that would be incredibly valuable. And we'll leave it up to you to work out. If you think Adams is very close, Sumner too, then that's fine. If you think there's something else we ought to see instead, let us know that.
Okay.
All right. I have Richard, are you right?
Yeah, I'm good. Just going to throw it out if anyone has anything else they'd like to discuss.
I have 2 items that I need to bring up. One is I have an email from Dr. Finan apologizing that she can't be here this morning due to another meeting, but saying hi and grateful for our work. The second one is that I have dutifully written up minutes of all these meetings, and they've been circulated and gone on the website, but I'm not sure at some point we oughtn't to vote to approve them. I think at some point in most committees you need to vote to approve minutes. Ginny, you're the expert.
Well, this is kind of, I mean, we can take a vote. We don't really have everyone here. That we have 2 out of the parent representatives.
We could do it next meeting, but it just suddenly occurred to me that having diligently written them up, normally at most meetings we approve minutes of something.
Yeah.
Why don't you put that on the agenda for the next meeting?
Yeah.
And that gives everybody a chance to review them.
I don't know if you can hear me. I haven't said anything really. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. You're worried about, approving minutes. but we're dealing with, and maybe this is a frustration other parents on this panel have experienced. We talk about things in these meetings that the purse strings and the decision makers have already done. And then we have questions like Dan brought up that are very relevant questions, but the decision makers and the people that run the purse strings have already moved forward with it. And here we are, we're doing these meetings on a 3-month cycle, and mostly, and nothing against Rocco, he provides great presentation. Mostly it's a discussion about Rocco and what is going on, which is valuable. But, Ro, you're talking about it's taking 2 hours. It's mostly briefing and a few questions. But now to hear that there's a concern whether or not we should approve the minutes, when it seems like the decisions to spend money and go after new technology and make decisions, I don't get any input on that, and I don't suppose that I'm here to make those decisions, but I am here to make those questions, because as soon as you started talking about new technology and we're doing this stuff, and Rocco's talking about, well, there's downsides and all that, but we went ahead, we're doing it anyway. It doesn't make any sense to me that now we're talking about, do we have enough people to approve minutes of a meeting? You're killing me. It's frustration. It's frustration that I experience, and I know a couple of the other parents are like, what are we really doing here? What are the parents, what is our real role? To collect information and then what? Disseminate it to who? So,
well, I think that was part of. Go ahead, Paul. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I have some frustration sitting through these meetings because there's no regulation that we're meeting. We're doing this because we're chasing a rainbow. I mean, I guess we're doing this because we heard this was a great idea, so we're going to do it.
That's ultimately, and I agree with you in a lot of what you said. My concern was when I asked those questions about the ionization things is I didn't want it to be portrayed as the environmental task force recommended them or suggested them or approved them I guess I have similar questions with regard to what our role is. And so that's the reason why I brought those up, because, with this committee was formed because of a need, because, things were not managed well in the past, things have gone very well. And Roy, I agree with you. We've made a lot of progress. But we were formed out of necessity for mismanagement of the past. And so my concern is exactly yours, is that what is truly our role?
Right. Well, there you go. I mean, when you say mismanagement, when I think of management, it's about resources. It's about public funds and federal funds and state funds that are being used to do these things. But I'm not part of the decision-making process. I'm not part of the largest part of these meetings is to discuss what has already happened and get updates on what we brought forward from the last meeting. Okay. I think you could probably get one of the news stations to log in here, and they could probably provide better details of what you talked about. But to me, it just seems like, we talked about it last meeting, we're going to do this, and there's no regulation, there's no mandate, but we're doing these, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. It doesn't make sense to me. That's not your money. It's not my money. It's public money. And when you make decisions like that,
Just if I can jump in, I don't know what I could say to make you feel better about it, but going into the funding, one big thing I've learned is being a public servant has been, all of it has, you have to be a good custodian of taxpayer dollars. So if I recommend anything, it's going to be because we've done the research and we deemed it safe. And we're going to be a good custodian of the taxpayer dollars. You know, I'm a taxpayer myself here in the district. So I don't want to see the taxes I've paid in mismanaged in any way. So as far as that's concerned, you know, it's something we're going to be cognizant of. We're going to be aware of that when we go to spend this money, that it's, you know, it's taxpayer dollars. Going into the safety side, I didn't partake in the meetings, you know, being new, of why the decision was made to purchase these. But I will say, you know, we are going to take the steps to ensure that it's safe. And if we can 100% say, yes, it's safe, then we'll do that. If there's any concern of whether the safety of again, employees or students are at risk, I'm not going to turn them on. And that's something that we are working with Rocco and the Conchardi Associates. So if we don't deem it safe, I'm not turning them on. Again, my concern and my drive and initiative of being here, one of my main duties is to ensure that safety and that well-being. If there's any risk, if I don't have a 100% this is safe, they're not turning on. So that's my primary concern. So well, again, I hope I make you feel better, but I don't know the best way to.
No, this is a cumulative. This has been going on for a year, and you know, Rocco is giving you his disclaimer about this stuff, but the money and the appropriations have already taken place. The plan is already in place to install. I don't get it.
We bought an unproven technology.
Yeah. You're looking for a miracle drug, you know, some snake oil salesman shows up, he's got one, hey, try this. But, you know, where is everything that lets you know that this is the best use of public funds to help mitigate issues that are in place or may occur?
And I think it's important to note here that in regard to the bipolar ionization, there were individuals from other engineering firms, other third-party experts who did feel as though this item was of use to us. If new information has come to light, we absolutely have to continue to assess it. And as I said before, I think it's wonderful that we have some people who are devoted to an abundance of caution and skeptical of this to make sure, as Rob said, before they are turned on, we've crossed all T's and dotted all I's. But I don't want to give the impression that this was just something that was pulled out of the air and, oh, let's try this. You know, there certainly was information, data, research on the other side of this as well, a reason that those professionals felt that they were a solid recommendation. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation before there are people in these classrooms and, you know, we are actually utilizing these units so that we can continue to understand it. But I think the broader discussion here about the role of this committee, I would just say, let's continue to build these agendas. You know, I think you're making a very good point. We are often getting updates after the fact, after the decisions have been made. We can be shifting that a bit. We just have to be a little bit more proactive about it. And in between these meetings, think about things that we would like to discuss, think about things that are coming down the pike at us. And I would certainly suggest being aware yourselves of what's coming up at work sessions, what's coming up at committee meetings. That's a good way for us to have that long range view and build an agenda where maybe we are debating an issue and we're getting your input before, you know, and I think that's just going to be the evolution of this committee and others like it.
Well, what is the process to make a decision, or, you know, what is the process, you know, from an idea to solve a solution? You know, what is the blockchain to get to the decision? Because it seems to me decisions are, you know, I never even heard about these. And then all of a sudden we're talking about something that's already been, you know.
And I think
there it is.
I think, Paul, that the timing issue is an inherent challenge in what we're trying to do here. This was something that Dewey Engineering and GPI, I believe both of them, felt would be helpful to us for a return to in-person instruction. In the immediate term, there were some things that we were able to do, but in the long term, and I was always of the opinion, whether it was right or wrong, but that systems like this, the extra filtration, all of those things would become even more vital when we weren't in a hybrid model, but when we were looking to a full return in the fall. And, you know, of course, getting these things ordered and installed and actually in our hands would be part of a lengthy process. But, you know, I think that in terms of the decision-making, these were things that were brought to us at work sessions and then approved at board meetings. And, you know, that is the role of the elected and appointed board of directors, to review these recommendations and make these decisions. I think now that we are coming out, perhaps, I hope, of the emergency phase of all of these things, because of course this was born out of the environmental issues, and then we leapt right into COVID. You know, now we may be in a position where we can look at what's coming at us. And I think the capital improvement plan and the building reconfiguration, I mean, all of this folds into a moment where we might be able to make long range plans rather than operate in the reaction mode, which is where we are right now.
But I don't, and I understood everything you said. I just don't understand, you know, I worked with regulations and requirements and shall and will and must for many, many years, and meeting standards. I want someone to tell me that this thing was required by law, but by federal, state, some local law or regulation that requires it. And
well, no one can tell you that.
It's not going to happen because there isn't anything.
No, and I mean, that was not the case, and it was never described as such. This was a recommendation, and obviously there are different opinions on it. There were places that we couldn't utilize the MERV 13 filters, and this was a way to supplement that. So, you know, I mean, you're not going to find a regulation. It doesn't exist. This is something that our third party experts, advisors, team players, whatever you want to call them, many of them felt that this was a good option and something worth pursuing. And if that was a mistake because new information is coming to light, all we can do is say, these are the reasons we made that decision at that time, and we are not going down that path. I hope that won't be the case. I hope that as we assess all of this, it is something we will be able to utilize if it's appropriate, because I agree with you. I don't want to see waste. I don't want to see mistakes made, but I also am not going to, if there are now questions about this item, I'm not going to just dig in my heels and say, well, we bought it, so we're going to use it. If we're finding out new information and we have to readjust, we have to readjust.
Right.
But equally,
it just seems to me like there still is not a process there still is not a process that the purse strings and the decision makers are using to make sound decisions that, you know, at the end of the day, they're bulletproof.
And if you have a process for that, I am open to it. The process we have in place is to take these things through committee, through work session, based on recommendations of people who are expert in their field. And I would love to have bulletproof recommendations like that. I don't think it's realistic. I think all we can continue to do is monitor new information as it comes to light and try to make the best decisions we can with the information that is in front of us, and be willing to admit if something has changed, if something was misjudged, and we need to take another course of action. And that is the very best we can all do. But I think to move forward here, we should absolutely be looking to build these agendas to have a more forward-looking approach. I think in terms of the role of this committee and the communication piece, I think having Rocco give as thorough and complete an update as he has on what has happened, my hope was that if someone had a question in the community, if you were aware of a conversation taking place, that you would be able to say, oh, I know about this, I know about that, I can give you a little bit more information. You know, that was the very, that was the communication and maybe the feel-good piece of all of this, for lack of a better term. But I think moving forward, as we look at the capital improvement plans and where we are going in this district, this committee can take an advisory role, and in, you know, maybe we can back this out in a way that as recommendations are coming to the board, we have time to bring them in front of this body for your input as well.
President Gilmartin, also I feel that parent members of this committee should feel free at any time, if there is an issue that concerns them, that they don't need to wait 3 months for the meeting. An email to us saying, I've just seen that this is happening, what's going on, we can do it. There is instantaneous communication. We can get updates out to the committee if there's things you want to bring in. Certainly the bipolar things were discussed, and we have, you know, as is not uncommon, we have experts with varying opinions, and we made a decision based on weighing various opinions, and we have purchased them, and as President Gilmartin says, we will evaluate them. But if there are concerns you have, put them in an email, put them in a phone call, and we can discuss things at least in text and email between meetings. And perhaps bringing something that concerns you to our attention is a very valuable part of the work of the committee.
And I also think, to that point, Ro, perhaps we can do, you and I, with Ginny's help, a better job of alerting this committee to things that are coming before the board. You know, if there are items that relate to the scope of this committee that are coming to an operations committee meeting or to a work session, we can certainly let you all know so that you can be logged on or be in the room when that happens.
All right.
So along those lines, could we, as part of this meeting, if there are concerns or topics that want to get on the agenda, we can coordinate emails through Jenny or to the whole audience, and I can work with Rob to make sure they get on that agenda. It sounds like for September, we'd want to have some sort of update from the board on the capital plan that may initiate some thoughts on future topics at that point. So I think that's a fair way. If we try 30 days before the next meeting or a month before, it gives some time for the stakeholders to respond to that candidate agenda topic to discuss at that meeting. As far as approval of meeting minutes, I'm not, from my perspective, this board has no authority or approval authority over anything. It's more of a forum to hold the administration and the school district accountable and communicate, status. Certainly, I think if we could look more forward looking.
Richard, the only reason I say that is that they are posted on the task force. They are my record of the meeting.
Oh yeah, no, I understand.
Meeting. It puts me in the position of stating what happened in the meeting with nobody else in the meeting having the opportunity to either correct or comment on them. That's the only reason I suggested that we approve the minutes. And I'm sorry that it caused such a firestorm, but it's purely a procedural thing to give you people on the other members of the committee who aren't writing up the minutes the opportunity to say that whether or not you want them changed or whether you agree with them. That's all.
And that's fine. I understand that. Okay, so anything else we want to discuss? So I'll look for agenda inputs mid-August, and maybe we can discuss them at the 25th, the tour on the 25th, in preparation for our September 15th meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay. So I'd move to adjourn. There's nothing else.
Well, one final, just real quick, so I'm clear. The 15th, is that an in-person or is that a Zoomer as well?
That's a good question.
Okay, I thought I had road both, and then I crossed one out, but Northeast obviously in person on the 25th at 9. Meeting at 9 on the 15th is the committee meeting. Either way, it's fine by me.
At this point, can we leave it at Zoom, and then later on, if things change, possibly? I feel it's the only place that we could possibly meet would be in the administrative building, and at that point, because we do have school administrators there, and I can't in the second week of school, perhaps they need to be close to the action, and I'm not sure what the position about people in the administration building is going to be at that time. At the moment, I know they're trying to keep the occupancy level there very low. But
Ro, I think if no one objects to Zoom, it is very efficient. I mean, I've been here participating in this meeting, able to also get some work for my actual job done. So that's been great.
I agree, Katie. I was doing the same thing.
Very good.
I think Zoom, I would prefer to keep it on Zoom.
So be it. Sounds good.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
See you
See you
guys.
next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.